Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Diaolu, and once again, today we'll be looking at a guide towards your second lecture in case you missed lecture 2. And the title of today's lecture is Disease 1. Now we're looking at the title Disease 1, and as you have it over there, you have a picture of someone who has smallpox and the fact that it had been eradicated in 1979. It's good to hear that it has been eradicated, but all the same, there is also the need for vaccination in some cases, especially in some rural areas as well. Now, what is disease? It says sickness is brought on by a violation of laws of health. So this implies that there is what we call laws of health. And if you are to interchange anything there, you can change the sickness to disease. So disease is brought on by a violation of laws of health. But that is not the definition. It's just an introduction. Now you have, it says again in the next slide, by observing the laws of health and caring well for the body, it is possible to avoid at least 80% of the sickness with which the majority of the people are afflicted with. Now, what is saying here is the fact that it's possible for one to actually avoid diseases and sickness, what have you, if one goes by their rules. And this is not something that probably could be difficult to understand. A good example is when this COVID-19 was spreading here and there, you had some rules in the sense that, okay, you have to maintain distance with whoever you are contacting, and at the same time, you have to use nose or face masks. All these are what the rules guiding guiding you to avoid COVID-19. So there is always one rule or the other that once it's been observed, then there's possibility of avoiding the disease. Now you have human disease in medicine. Now we're going to the definition. Human disease in medicine is defined as any harmful change that interferes with the normal appearance, structure, or function of the body or any of its parts. Now take that again. Human disease in medicine is defined as any harmful change that interfere with the normal appearance, structure, or function of the body or any of its parts. Now let's look at it again. Now it says in medicine, so that means that disease has to do with a research in medicine. Now it's defined as what? Harmful change. Now what do we mean by harmful change? That means that in the long run, something has been affected, just like maybe if somebody have a particular injury now, a harm has been caused on the body. So harmful change in the sense that the health has been affected. So in medicine, it's defined as any harmful change health-wisely that interfere with the normal appearance. It's possible for somebody to appear in your front and you will know that this person is suffering one particular disease or the other. So the normal appearance could be affected, the structure could be affected, the person may not be able to move or walk around as usual, or function of the body. That implies that even some things that the fellow intend or usually do could also be affected as well, or any part of its body as well. Now, the term disease broadly refers to any condition that impairs normal functions of the body. So disease could affect the functioning of any part of the body or all part of the body or some part of the body. Now, since time immemorial, disease has played a role in the history of mankind. Definitely, there is no going back on that. Now, it has affected and been affected by what? Economic conditions, wars, and natural disaster. economic condition, we could say that if somebody is not having enough money with him, he might find it difficult going to visit a doctor, despite he knows that he is ill. He could just be sitting there because he doesn't have enough money. So you have the wars as well. A lot of gases are produced after war as a result of all these so-called what do you have it, the bombs and some other things that are being thrown here and there, and therefore it could affect even any other humans that are still left after the wars. So you also have the natural disaster, erosion, or what have you, could also affect one's what do you call it, the level at which disease is being spread. So all these are what affect disease. Now let's look at it this way. Let's imagine you are in the exam and they said, okay, since time immemorial, disease has always been affected by A, economic condition, B, war, C, natural disaster, D, let's say immunity. If you do not read this line 2 times, you might find it difficult to actually pick the right answer. The idea about this is the fact that this course mostly will be objectives, and if you find any part which you do not go through, especially those areas that have to do with definitions, it's most likely that you might be found wanting when you are faced with a question. Now, indeed, the impact of disease can be far greater than better known calamity. This is not strange, as diseases could wipe up a whole community even within a shortest period of time. COVID-19 has demonstrated that in some areas around the world. We're just lucky over here in Nigeria. And you have, it says, an epidemic of influenza that swept the globe in 1918 killed from 20 million to 50 million people, 2 to 5 times more deaths than were caused by World War I, which is between 1914 to 1918. Now, with a few months, more than 500,000 Americans died of the 1918 influenza known as the Spanish flu. In the long run, when somebody has a disease, it is a problem to everybody, and it would be wrong for you to realize that somebody is having a disease and not take any action at all. There used to be a story we told while we were young that there is a man that anytime somebody is about to die in the community, he's the only one that sees like a flies in form of a circle flying on the head of that person, and it would inform their family that this person is going to die. So once he says that, everybody just say, okay, what do we do? All your money, just hand it over, this and that, hand it over. And before you know it, the following morning, the person will sleep and will not wake up the following day. So he was so happy about it, and a lot of people consult him, who is going to die next, and he will move around the community and happy about it. Now, in the long run, there was a day that they were asking that, okay, who is next? And he said, I can't seem to find anybody who was next. And it's like, I'm not sure anybody's dying today. So everybody were happy. But later in the evening, as he was about to go to bed, something just told him that, okay, have I even checked my own head? As he looked up, he just saw the fly on front of me on top of his head. And wow, what that implies is that he's the next person to die. Then he started rounding around here and there that, wait, what are we going to do? This thing is killing us. What am I supposed to do now? Is there any way we can prevent it? This and that. But it's too late. And that is exactly what happens when somebody has a disease, and you probably think it's not your problem at that moment. You never can tell what will happen in the next few days that they're about. So the better everybody takes care of everybody, the better everybody survives. Now, many people erroneously think that disease is an unavoidable calamity. Physicians and scientists have now demonstrated that diseases are due to scientific causes. Now, for example, some diseases are due to the body not being supplied with the proper kind of nourishment. Beriberi is such a disease. Now, the fact remains that when we hear the word disease, it's always like it's a very huge something or sickness, but in some cases, it's not actually as huge as we thought of it. So that is just what that slide is saying. Now you have there are diseases that are caused by poison entering the body. Such a disease is phosphorus poisoning, which is often contracted by those who work in match factories. So be that as it may, somebody could be exposed to phosphorus by if he's working with a match factory, and that is also referred to as disease as well. Now you have disease may be brought on by wrong habits. For example, wrong habit of eating may cause indigestion. If we are being informed that indigestion is a disease, I'm sure some of you would not want to agree with that. But the fact remains that it is also causing harm as well to the body. Now, many ailments are caused by bacteria, virus, fungi, algae, and worm, and so on. We'll still talk about those later on. Now, you have infectious diseases. Now, infectious diseases are clinical evidence diseases that result from the presence of pathogens, microbial agents, including virus, bacteria, fungi, protozoa, multicellular organisms, and aberrant proteins known as prions. Now, there is something about the word infectious diseases. Now, as record has it, the name has been on for over 15 years or thereabout. And as we're speaking now, the old name is still being used. What am I saying? There is infectious diseases, and there is an old name used earlier before then, and up to now, it is still being used interchangeably. What that implies is that in some cases, somebody might say infectious diseases, and in some cases, you might hear them saying communicable diseases. So another name for infectious disease is communicable disease, or the old name of infectious disease is communicable diseases. But whether you use infectious or communicable, they are both the same. So bear that in mind. And despite the fact that infectious diseases should have been used, some people still use communicable diseases, and this has always been everywhere. People get difficult at getting themselves used to new names, especially if they have been used to the old ones. If I want to use example of my own profession as an example, if I ask any of you now that there used to be a ball that is being called tennis ball, like a round ball not bigger than a size of an orange, and I tell you that the ball is called tennis ball. Now I ask, okay, what is the name of the game? If I ask you now, a majority of you will say, that's long tennis, whereas that is a wrong name. The name has been corrected over 15 years ago, and up to now, people still made that mistake calling the event long tennis. The word lawn there was introduced because the event started from a lawn, just like there's another game called table tennis, which is played on table. So long tennis was playing on lawn before, but now it's even on the mud or clay. You have it on a cemented wall or floor, I mean. So if you're not playing it on a clay, are you now going to call it clay tennis? So that was when they removed the name that, okay, let's just pick it as being tennis. But like I said, over 15 years, and people still call it long tennis. So in the same way, infectious disease is the name, but some people still take it as communicable disease, and both are still correct. So you have this microbial agent coming up here again. And like I said, we're still going to look at it. But most importantly, infectious diseases are clinical evidence disease. So clinical evidence disease in the sense that it has been observed under various research, and now there is a test for it that makes a doctor to be able to differentiate between a malaria and typhoid. So in this, it is a what? A clinical evidence that when such person have this, the symptoms and some other things, the doctor will be able to say, okay, this is this, this is that. That's the meaning of the clinical evidence. So infectious diseases are clinical evidence diseases that result from the presence of pathogenic microbial agent. It is usually caused by what? Pathogenic microbial agent. And what are these microbial agents? It includes bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and the rest of them. Now, infectious disease, by contrast, an infection that is asymptomatic during its incubation period but expected to produce symptoms later is usually considered as a disease. Now, for the objectives, please bear in mind that you have two words there: asymptomatic and incubation period. And if you've not been coming for classes, you might miss some of these definitions too, because it doesn't really appear in this note. Now you have, what do we mean by asymptomatic? Just as the name apply, asymptomatic. So you must have heard about symptoms before. So asymptomatic means without symptoms. So without signs and symptoms, without a means of identifying that this is exactly what this person is going through. If somebody has high temperature now, you could say, and is looking weak, you could say, okay, this is malaria. Now, if somebody is having malaria and is not having any sign of hot temperature, there's no way you will know. So when a disease does not have a symptoms, that's what it refers to as asymptomatic. Now, by contrast, an infection that is asymptomatic during its incubation period. Now, what do we mean by incubation period? Now, let me just give an example to give you an illustration. Now, let's imagine that somebody has a common cold, which is, like the name appears, common cold, very common, and sneezing up and down. Now, fortunately, a friend came in and the guy who has common cold sneezed on his face. Now, the moment that appeared, or when that sneeze was out of him on the face of his friend, he has contacted the common cold disease. Now he has it on him. But what happened? You will not expect him immediately to sneeze back. No. It could take a while, all still depending on the level of his immunity at that period. If he has been catching cold and his immunity has been trying to fight it one way or the other, and that happened, then it could happen that probably some few hours he would start sneezing back. Now let's imagine that somebody has sneezed on the face of an individual and now what happens after like a day, which is the usual period that the fellow is likely to come out again to sneeze. So what we're saying now is that somebody sneezed on a friend and the fellow contacted the disease of common cold, but you never see him sneezing. He's just going his normal way. He didn't sneeze. You didn't see him sneeze at all. But after like 24 hours, as he was sitting somewhere, you just see him sneezing out, just like his friend. Then you could say that he has common cold. But if you look back, you might find it difficult to know that it was exactly 24 hours behind that he contacted it. So now let's look at the analysis now. What incubation period means is at that point when his friend sneezed on him to the point when he first sneezed out. That's the period they call incubation period. The period of contact till the period of the manifestation of the first signs and symptoms. So that is what we call incubation period. But asymptomatic is now saying that there is possibility of somebody having a common cold and not showing it. So, and this usually happens during the incubation period. So what is implied now that the whole of that day that the fellow did not sneeze out, that means that disease is the individual didn't sneeze out at all. So those are the two strong words used here. So by contrast, an infection that is asymptomatic, that is not showing symptoms during its incubation period, but expected to produce symptoms later, is usually considered a disease. So a disease is likely not to have symptoms during incubation period, but after then, the symptoms comes out. Now, non-infectious disease. Now, just like we have communicable disease, which is another name for infectious disease, which is the old name for infectious disease. Now, for non-infectious disease, the old name for it is also non-communicable disease. Now, non-infectious diseases are all other diseases, including most forms of cancer, heart disease, and genetic disease. In the long run, these are diseases that probably, if one has it, is not likely to be able to transfer it to his or her friend. Now, illness and sickness are generally used as synonyms for diseases. Now, that happens, but in the recent of it, sickness is like an attribute of a disease. So get that one first. But there's illness and there's sickness and there's disease. But sickness is like an attribute of a disease. Now, however, this term is, that's why at times they can use sickness and disease easily, unlike illness. Now, let's just get that together. Now, however, this term is occasionally used to refer to specifically to the patient's personal experience of their diseases. Now, in this model, it is possible for a person to be diseased without being ill. Now, get that, it is possible for a person to be diseased without being ill. If you are going to look for another word close to ill, you can use the word weakness, so that you can easily pick the meaning here. Now, it is possible for a person to be diseased without being weak. Let's use it now, without being ill, without being weak. To have an objective, definable, but asymptomatic medical condition. Now, let's take that again. It is possible for a person to be diseased without being ill. So what that means is that the person is diseased but is not weak. So that means that because he's not weak, he is still what? He has a disease, but the symptom is not showing. So that's why I say to have an objective, definable, but asymptomatic medical condition. So there is no weakness because the symptoms is yet to surface. So it is possible to have a disease without being ill. So get that point. Now it's still being repeated. It's just a repeated. Now it says, and to be ill without being diseased. So it's possible for somebody to also be weak and not being diseased. So if somebody is ill and is not diseased, then such as when a person perceives a normal experience or a medical condition, or medicalize a non-disease situation in his or her life. Now that reminds me of some people that probably they just feel like something and they will say that I'm not okay, Gary, and you try and find out what is happening. I'm not feeling fine, and whereas it's just an expression of emotion based on what is going on. So when such things happen, you could say that that person is ill but not being diseased, because of the fact that he just felt like, or probably there's actually a kind of thing that is bringing about a weakness in his or her life at that moment in time. So illness is often not due to infection but a collection of involved responses. So it is not usually as an infection but collection of involved responses and sickness behavior by the body which aids the clearing of infection. Such aspects of illness can include lethargy, depression, using depression as the common one there. So somebody who has depression could say that it's disease, but in the long run, it's not disease. It's just a kind of attribute from the depression that is making him to be weak at that moment. Now let's look at another subtitle here, disorder. Now in medicine, a disorder is a functional abnormality or disturbance. Now, one thing about the word disorder is that the word is a little bit strong, but in some cases, we could look at it like it's not too a big word. But if you take the word literally, you know that when something is disorder, it means that it's not orderly, and it's even saying something is crazy is even much more what, much more better, because this is like other way around. It's going the other way, and that's why it's being called disorder. And it's just like when you look at some of our words that we interpret to our own languages. It could be funny at times. If somebody tells you now that you have bad luck, you may not take offense because of the fact that bad luck it's not too heavy, but in the reason of it, let somebody else say it in your own indigenous language, like in Yoruba now. If the person said Olori Buruku ni, you will see how the person will react immediately. It would, that's to tell you that in our own indigenous language, it has a heavy meaning. So disorder itself has a heavy meaning, but it could look a little bit minute now, but it has a heavy meaning because it's when something is not orderly. So that's the opposite. That's the meaning. Now, the term disorder is often considered more value neutral and less stigmatizing than the term disease or illness, and therefore it's preferred terminology in some circumstances. It could be a preferred terminology, but doesn't make it better off. Now, in mental health, the term mental disorder is used as a way of acknowledging the complex interaction of biological, social, and psychological factors in psychiatric conditions. So in this, we could realize that mental health has what the term mental disorder, and is used as a way of acknowledging the complex interaction of biological, social, and psychological factors in psychiatric conditions. So mental and disorder doesn't look good. However, the term disorder is also used in many other areas of medicine, primarily to identify physical disorders that are not caused by infectious organs, such as metabolic disorder. So we have a lot of disorder in medical lines as well. So you have another word here. Please endeavor to know some of this meaning or the definitions. As a definition could be swapped in your objectives. A definition could be written and you'll be expected to say, okay, let's imagine now, they says dash is a disease state, disability, or poor health due to any cause, and you did not read anything about morbidity, you might end up picking another word there. So please bear in mind that definitions are vital here. Now, the term may be used to refer to the existence of any form of disease or to the degree that the health condition affects the patient. Now, the fact remains that words like morbidity are used mostly by medical practitioners just to be able to fractionalize some rate of existence of diseases, and probably to be able to find out the rate at which the disease is affecting one particular place or the other. So it's used for statistical analysis in a lot of cases. Now, comorbidity. Now, this one is what is a simultaneous presence of two or more medical conditions, such as signal failure and substance abuse. If you were to give an example, I don't know whether you've ever seen a situation whereby somebody will go to the hospital and they will say he has typhoid, and they tell him as well that he also have malaria, and you continue to imagine why does he have two? But it's possible because of the fact that one disease could open another way for another one due to the fact that the immunity has been broken, so the body is exposed to one or two attacks. Now, in epidemiology, the term morbidity rate can refer to either the incidence rate or the prevalence of a disease or medical condition. Now, this measure of sickness is constructed with the mortality rate of a condition, which is the proportion of person dying during a given time interval. Now, in the long run, what we're saying here is that morbidity has to do with the incidence of or rate of a particular disease. Like I said earlier on, it's a means of doing some calculations to be able to find out how a particular disease is affecting one group of people or the other, and the rate at which it's spreading. Now, at the same time, a disease can also be contracted with the mortality rate, which is has to do with the death rate. So that means that if the disease is affecting the rate at which people are dying, it will also be made, it will also be calculated together by health professionals who are in line with this. So you have causes and transmissibility. Only some diseases such as influenza are contagious and commonly believed to be infectious. Now, the microorganisms that causes this disease are known as pathogens and include varieties of bacteria, viruses, protozoa, and fungi. Now, diseases which are transmissible are usually affected by pathogens, which you have example as being bacteria, virus, protozoa, and fungi. And all these varieties of pathogens have their own strong strengths and weaknesses as well. And when you are fighting one, there's a particular drugs you have to use, and if you're fighting the other one, there's also a particular drug with you. So these are meant or better being recommended by professionals, because it will not be fun if you are having a bacterial infection and you are not using the right dosage for it. So it's a way of getting the disease out of you if you have the right knowledge of the particular disease as well. So microorganisms that causes this disease are known as pathogens. So when you are being asked that one of the following is not a pathogen, and probably you have bacteria, virus, and you have protozoa, and maybe the last one that was written was let's say amoeba or what have you. You are not expected to pick any other one but amoeba, because amoeba is not one of them. So you should have an idea of what pathogens are as well. Anywhere you see any color different, please take note. That means it's vital as well. Now, infectious disease can be transmitted by hand to mouth contact with infectious material on surface, by bites of insects or other carriers of the disease, and from contaminated water or food. Now, you have infectious disease, and like they said, infectious disease, like I call it earlier on, as communicable diseases. Now, in the long run, we're saying that infectious disease can be transmitted. How? By various means. And it now says hand to mouth. Now, the idea about it is that even the so-called hand to mouth, if we look at a good example, let's imagine now that maybe somebody just finished sneezing on somebody just finished sneezing and he didn't want the whole of it to escape, and he used his palm to cover it a little. And the next thing that his friend is just coming and they say, what's up, G? And he's shaking his friend. What happened in the course of that shaking of hands? He has ended up transferring common cold to him. So instead of saying, what's up, G? You should have just said that, welcome to common cold. So that should have been what he or she should have said. So in the long run, what we're saying here is that there are some culture that even while observing it, you should also observe it very well. Probably this is one of the reasons why even in Nigeria, when COVID was spreading, we had limited survival. We have limited transmission of it, because it was easy to tell people do not have a handshake, because even in our culture, we don't really do it. It's just a borrowed culture that makes everybody to do handshake here and there. The reasons of it. There used to be one of old story that we were being informed about our great parents, and that if you are greeting an elderly person, if you want to greet them, then you have to greet them from a distance like 5 meters to you. If you are prostrating, you prostrate and you get up before they get close to you, because then wicked people, like they say, then once they put their hand on a small child, they could cause harm that the child will be nothing. So the fact remains that there has already been a culture that keep people away from each other, especially if they don't want to get in touch with such persons. So it could be a good culture if you actually find a way of not contacting people unnecessarily when you know that you do not have to. That way you could prevent some other infection from getting to you as well. Now let's look at the next slide. Talks about, in addition, there are sexually transmitted diseases. There is also sexually transmitted disease. We'll still get to that in the long run. Now, in some cases, microorganisms that are not readily spread from in some cases, microorganisms that are not readily spread from person to person play a role, while other diseases can be prevented by or ameliorated with appropriate nutrition or other lifestyle changes. This place is just trying to bring our mind to the non-communicable disease. That's why this next sentence says some diseases such as most but not all forms of cancer, heart disease, and mental disorder are non-infectious diseases. So many non-infectious diseases have a partly or completely genetic basis and may thus be transmitted from one generation to the other. Remember, I said even non-infectious disease is usually called a non-communicable disease before, but there's also a name that it's also researchable that people also call it. If you realize, there's a place there they said completely genetic basis and thus may be transmitted from one generation to the other. Now, the old name I'm referring to is sometimes non-infectious disease could also be referred to as degenerative diseases. Degenerative disease in the sense that it goes on within you and degenerate your system or the individual system from inside, and before it surfaces to the outside world, it could have damaged a lot of things even inside that individual. So non-infectious disease could also be called degenerative diseases. Now, looking at another part, it says burden of a disease. Disease burden is the impact of a health problem in an area measured by financial cost, mortality, morbidity, or other indicators. There are several measures used to quantify the burden imposed by a disease on others. Now, this is not difficult. They said disease burden, like the name burden, is the impact of a health problem in an area. So it's talking about how a health of a particular area is being affected by diseases, and it can be measured by financial cost, mortality, morbidity, or other indicators. And it's also, there are several measures used to quantify the burden imposed by disease. I would like to say at this point that these are just like factors that are being used by professionals in medical lines. Now, you have the year of potential life lost. It's a simple estimate of the number of years that a person's life was shortened due to a disease. This seems to be straightforward, and it's just saying that you have to calculate the years of potential life lost. Now, for example, if a person died at the age of 65 from a disease and would probably have lived until age 80 without that disease, then that disease has caused a loss of 15 years of potential life. So that means that the fellow's life has been shortened because of that disease. That is the years of potential life loss. Now, you have some other factors that also comes in when it comes to all this kind of calculation. What I would like to advise is you can't exactly state why some of these calculations are used, but for a professional who is in the line knows the value of all these words, like you have quantify adjusted life years or disability adjusted life year. Now, if you are going to look at how, it's just like trying to find out from a mother now who probably has 5 kids, or let's say he has 4 kids, and you have him, herself, and the husband. That makes it 6 in the family. And the mother is saying, if I'm going to cook now, if we want to eat, we have to take 7 cups of rice since we are 6. And then if I go a little bit below, that means that we will not be eating enough. So how does the mother get to the understanding that this is the number of cups of rice he or she is going to cook? It's because of over years of cooking. So in this sense, we're saying that based on a lot of calculation, this is how this measurement starts coming up, and now it has become a standard for a lot of factors which are being measured by the professionals. Now, We'll go to therapy and treatment. Now, medical therapies or treatment are efforts to cure or improve a disease or other health problem. So you have what we call medical therapy or treatment. So it could be medical therapy or treatment. In some cases, it's called therapy. In some cases, it's called treatment. The both are what can be used depending on the cases. Now, of other health problems. Now, in the medical field, therapy is synonymous with the word treatment. Among psychologists, the term may refer specifically to psychotherapy or talk therapy. Common treatment include medication, surgery, medical device, and self-care. Now, you have treatment may be provided by an organized healthcare system or informally by the patient or family member. There are cases where treatment are being provided by a family member based on experience and based on the fact that it is still quite a little bit not beyond treatment in terms of not beyond first aid treatment. Now, prevention or preventive therapy is a way to avoid an injury, sickness, or disease in the first place. A treatment or cure is applied after a medical problem has already started. So there's a preventive therapy which will not allow disease to come in at all, and there's also treatment or cure which has to be applied after the treatment, after the sickness or disease is already in the individual body. Now, a treatment attempt to improve or remove a problem, but treatment may not produce permanent cures, especially in chronic disease. Cure are subset of treatment that reverse disease completely or end medical problem permanently. Many diseases that cannot be completely cured are treatable. There is a difference between cure and treatment. Treatment is different from cure. If you have malaria now, you get a malaria treatment. It doesn't mean that once you take the dosage, that means that's bye-bye to malaria. No. After a while, what happened? It can still come back, maybe because of some set of bites again. Then you take another treatment for it. But in the case of cure, once you take it, that is the end and bye-bye to such disease. Now you have pain management, also called pain medicine, is that branch of medicine employing an interdisciplinary approach to the relief of pain and improving in the quality of life of those living with pain. Now, treatment for medical emergency must be provided promptly, often through an emergency department or in less critical situations through an urgent care facility. Now, you still have some further items or terminologies here. When you hear airborne disease, is a disease that spread through the air, contagious disease, a subset of infectious disease. Cryptogenic disease, a disease whose cause is currently unknown. You have disseminated disease, a disease that is spread throughout the body. You have lifestyle disease, a disease caused largely by lifestyle choice. Localized disease, a disease affecting one body part or area. You have non-communicable or non-infectious disease, a disease that cannot spread between people. Progressive disease, a disease that gets worse over time. Rare disease, a disease that affects very few people. Systematic disease, a disease that affects the whole body. Thank you for listening, and hopefully we'll see you on the next class or on the next slide. Have a lovely day.